Right on time. Good afternoon. And welcome to the December meeting of the Board of Revenue Estimates. I want to begin today's meeting by welcoming and extending congratulations to the new Secretary of the Department of Budget Management. Congratulations. I'm glad it'll be such an easy first year for you, It's great to have you here, and we're just excited to work with you. Also, of course, it's great to see Treasurer Davis again. Today, we are here to review the findings and recommendations of the Revenue Monitoring Consensus Group, or the RMC. Our task is to consider and vote on the proposed December 2025 forecast, which includes updated outlooks for FY26 and FY27 general fund revenues. As a reminder, the general fund accounts for roughly 40% of Maryland's annual state revenues. It is primarily composed of the personal income tax, the corporate income tax, and the sales and use tax. Maryland is proud to boast to be a best practice state in revenue forecasting, taking a consensus-based approach that brings together experts and data to ensure our projections are as accurate and as transparent as possible. The forecast we're reviewing today was developed by the Bureau of Revenue Estimates and incorporates the most current data available: year-to-date revenue collections, projections from national economic consulting firms, and sophisticated econometric models. Revenue forecasting is inherently challenging, and with the numerous economic shifts our country and state have faced in recent months, forecasting requires analytical rigor and prudent judgment from the individuals involved in this process, some of whom we are so happy to be joined by here today. With that, I'll turn it over to Robert Rehrman, who is the Director of the Bureau of Revenue Estimates, to walk us through today's report. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And before I start with the forecasts, as always, thank BRE team for your hard work in these estimates and also the dedication you show not only in the estimates, but in all the work that you do. And thank the RMC committee members, including the members who are in attendance today, in achieving these consensus revenue estimates. And turning to the proposed revisions to the forecast, for fiscal 26, the proposed revision is $26.8 billion. That's an increase of $90.7 million over the prior estimate. And that's estimated growth of 4.1% compared to the prior year. Turning to fiscal 27, our proposed estimate is $27.2 billion. That's an increase of only $9.1 million over the prior estimate and growth of 1.4%. Now, turning to the summary of the changes, we also have in this chart how we stand year to date in our revenues through October relative to the September estimate, which we're proposing to adjust today. In total, we are $75 million over the estimate approximately. We have some timing issues going on, so that underestimates our revenue strength modestly. So in other words, we're a little bit stronger than that top line shows. And before I talk about the details of the forecast, it's an important point to stress. As in September, our revenues continue to be in line with our expectations, despite the headwinds we face from Washington, D.C., these federal cutbacks, and then also this general uncertainty about the economy. For the most part, our forecast carries forward these positive and negative variances. And first, it results in kind of a recalibration of where we think we're going to get our revenues from our big three revenue sources. On the plus side, we modestly increase our personal income tax forecast. About half of that is due to a modest increase in our capital gains forecast. U.S. equities continue to do well in the year. And the remaining half is due to a technical change. We use new data when we go from the September to December forecast. Conversely, we're making a modest reduction to our sales tax forecast, and we are also reducing our corporate income tax forecast. I'll highlight that that's our weakest revenue source year to date, but I'll discuss later there's uncertainty over the factors that are driving that. Turning to our other revenues on the bottom of the table, we're recognizing strength in those other revenue sources that we have in the door, the largest of which is the estate tax. We have several large estate tax payments above our estimate. The second largest adjustment is in interest income. We're increasing that forecast by $45 million. So in total, a modest upwards adjustment, less than $100 million in fiscal '26 and less than $10 million in fiscal '27. A couple points just want to stress about this forecast, and the first has to deal with the federal government shutdown. It has a couple impacts on the forecast, the first of which is it's limited our additional data that we receive from the federal government. So in terms of state level total employment and that critical series that we keep track of, federal government employment in Maryland, we don't have any additional data compared to the September estimate. The second impact is in December, we hope to kind of have an initial read of the impact of the deferred resignation program. These are federal employees who are basically on administrative leave, but are generally getting paid through the end of September. And we're hoping in our October withholding collections, we get an initial readout of what, if any, impact that would have as they are no longer paid by the federal government. But because the shutdown occurred in the same month, we don't have a read on that. It's going to be a couple months before we can probably look at that data and figure that out. And lastly, in the September forecast, discussed a lot of the uncertainty this year in our forecasts. Not only do we have the general economic uncertainty in the nation, we have signs of slowing, possible recession. We also have risks specific to Maryland and the region, these federal cutbacks. We also have policy risks from the federal government, tariffs that are changing. And layered on top of that is we have these two significant pieces of tax legislation. We have both state tax legislation, the birth of 2025. We have the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's impacting both the personal income tax and corporate income tax. So when we have new or changed taxes, what we often see is that pushes revenue to the end of the fiscal year. So we don't have a lot of visibility on the accuracy of our estimates, and it's difficult for us to make course corrections, if you will. So for the personal income tax and the corporate income tax, we're probably not going to have an assessment of how those estimates are until the back end of the fiscal year, probably not until the summer. Good news on the sales tax, the expansion to the IT and data services. We're going to have data earlier, but we're not going to have meaningful data until the March forecast. Now, we don't have state-level employment data from the federal government, but one thing that we are tracking very carefully is federal spending in categories. And in general, what we're seeing is a reallocation of spending that's not favorable to Maryland and the region. So we're not really seeing a reduction in total spending, but a reduction in Maryland and the region. Looking at the upper left-hand corner, USAID, there was a shock and reduction in spending earlier in the year. We saw that had a big impact on not only USAID employees, but also contractors as well. We saw a number of layoffs early in the year. We're also carefully tracking health spending, given HHS is our largest agency employer, and we have a lot of health federal contractors as well. Looking at federal salaries nationwide, up to this point, we're not seeing a reduction, but rather slower growth. And the available wage data for Maryland paints a similar picture. We're growing about 3% year to date, despite these cuts in employment. But we typically, in the last few years, grew by 7%. So it's less strength coming from the federal government. What's the federal government spending more on? One thing they're spending more on is debt service. That additional spending does not stimulate the local economy. And in addition, the One Big Beautiful Bill included funding for immigration actions. Homeland Security does have a large presence in the region, including Anacostia, but that spending is unlikely to be concentrated in this area. It's going to be spread throughout the United States. So we're leaning a little bit more on our other available economic data. That includes unemployment insurance claims and our layoff notices. And in general, it paints a similar picture to September of the labor force. We're not seeing large growth in the labor force. However, we're not seeing companies shed a lot of employees. We're not having a contraction in the labor force. In addition, those employees who are in the private sector, they're getting higher raises than what's typical in the last few years. So since that initial pulse of layoffs in the spring, mainly related to those USAID contractors, we have normalized. November, we did see an increase. However, when we looked at the reasons for those layoffs, they were mainly long-planned reductions in operations. They weren't federal contractors, and it wasn't commentary about economic conditions deteriorating. Now, most of our revenue sources have been resilient, as I mentioned, despite the uncertainty from the federal government and economic uncertainty. And as always, highlight withholding and sales tax. Those are our two most powerful economic indicators. Every business day, the Comptroller's Office is processing these checks, and that gives us a real-time indicator of the strength of the labor force and also the strength of taxable consumer spending in the state. Looking at our growth year-to-date in withholding, it has slowed from last year, but last year was exceptionally strong, and we're still above our benchmark growth rate of 4%. In the sales tax, we do not see a concerning deterioration in spending, and also lottery showing the same picture. Sales are keeping up. They're not slowing. Even though our total spend is holding up, we do see some weakness in certain categories. And our brick and mortar casinos is one source of that weakness. We do have a decline in revenues there. And in addition, for the sales tax, even though our top line number is good, we're seeing some weakness in consumer spending in certain areas as consumers are stressed by the economic conditions and uncertainty. Now, I think throughout this year, when I've presented revenue updates, whether it's in RMC meetings or other meetings, the biggest reaction I get is, how is our withholding holding up, if you will, in the face of these federal government reductions, and given how interconnected we are with the federal government? So what we did is, first, we looked at our withholding collections, not including federal contractors or federal employees. This is mostly the private sector, but it includes state and local employment as well. And so far, we have not seen a deterioration in that growth. So contagion, if you will, has not spread to the private sector. This is different than prior reductions in federal spending. When that happened, we had a slowing in our private sector, and we have not seen that yet. We do expect that to slow next year as these cutbacks course through the economy. But again, there's strength in the private sector, and year to date, we're growing at 4.5%, and we had an acceleration in the third quarter to about 5%. The second part, or second reason why we don't see a concerning drop in our withholding, is related to direct federal employees, what is being remitted from the federal government. So despite this reduction in total employment, we're not seeing a reduction in our tax collections. And in fact, in the year-to-date of our total growth, the federal government is actually pushing up our growth rate by about 0.5%. Now, that's probably due to the deferred resignation program, those individuals being paid through September 30th. And that's something, again, next year we can't count on because these individuals will not continue to be paid by the federal government. And again, that critical variable is, are they going to be reemployed and being reemployed at a wage that's similar to what they're being paid by the federal government. And turning to our withholding tax forecast, again, that very strong growth rate in fiscal 25. We do have that weakness in calendar year 26. We do have a recovery in calendar year 27, growth rate that's typical of our 4% benchmark. But the weakness in 2026 is being spread to both fiscal '26 and fiscal '27, and it's resulting in that sub 4% growth. As I mentioned, the corporate income tax revenues are our weakest major revenue source to date, but there is a lot of uncertainty over what's contributing to that. We do know that the One Big Beautiful Bill had a number of complex corporate income tax provisions, and it was designed to decrease federal tax collections in the near term. However, we also know we decoupled from three of the largest or most impactful of those provisions that impact the state corporate income tax. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the bill, both on the federal tax system and state taxes. So it's likely that estimated payments so far, and I should stress we only have 1/4 of data, may not reflect their ultimate corporate tax liability. And we do have a precedent for this. When the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, there's a lot of uncertainty about those provisions, how it would filter down to the state corporate income tax. And at the end of the year, we saw a surge in final payments as corporations kind of worked through all those different provisions. We're not counting on that in the forecast, but if that's true, our revenues year to date are not as weak as they seem. We do see some evidence of some Maryland-specific weakness. Specifically, we looked at federal contractors. Now, our defense contractors are holding up in terms of their tax payments. However, we're seeing some weakness in some non-defense federal contractors. And that's consistent with our understanding, this reallocation of spending away from non-defense activities in the state. So really, the corporate income tax, it illustrates the uncertainty that we're facing in a lot of our revenue sources. But as always, we're going to continue to monitor our economic data, our tax data, and make appropriate adjustments as necessary in March. But again, in closing, very important point to stress is our revenues are holding up despite the uncertainty and headwinds that we're facing from the federal government. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. Appreciate all the work and the very clear slides. Before I turn over to Secretary Weissman and Treasurer Davis, I just have a few takeaways and then some larger comments that I'd like to make today. First, the takeaways: the forecast remains relatively unchanged with a slight reallocation for FY26. The board has forecast total general fund revenues of $26.7 billion in FY26, a growth of 4.1% over the FY25 actual revenue, and $27.1 billion in FY27, an increase of 1.4%. Maryland's revenues remain resilient, with our withholding as well as sales and use tax performing so far so good this fiscal year. I'd also like to take time to thank you, Director Rariman, and thanks to the whole team. Thank you all for your diligence in monitoring our revenues, in creating forecasts that set reasonable expectations, and doing this deep work. At this time last year, we were very proactive in reducing our revenue forecasts because of the uncertainty that we faced because of the incoming administration. And those adjustments, turns out, were quite appropriate, and given changes signaled by the Trump administration, including the elimination of thousands of federal jobs. And while our state is currently meeting our revenue expectations, we certainly wish our expectations did not have to be lowered as they were last year because of the obstacles placed in our path by our own federal government. I have a few other comments today because I think it's clear that the positive news we have today, these numbers alone don't tell the whole story of how our economy is functioning and can obscure the realities that some of our friends and neighbors are facing as they struggle to afford basic necessities. Maryland is certainly currently meeting its revenue expectations, but it's important to acknowledge that those expectations, as I mentioned, were lowered, due in part to challenges created by our own federal government. And we benefit in Maryland from a strong base of high-income earners, and we boast one of the highest median household incomes in the nation. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, Census Bureau, and American Community Survey, our median income stands at over $102,000. $102,905, well above the national average. But focusing solely on that number can really miss a critical truth because so many Marylanders are living on the margins. Nearly 39% of households fall into the ALICE category, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. These are families that are earning above the poverty line, but still unable to afford essentials like housing, food, childcare, and healthcare. This includes roughly 10% of households living in poverty and another 29% just above it, yet still facing financial hardship. And Maryland is not immune to the affordability crisis that we are seeing across the country. In fact, it's affecting not only low-income families, but also families that would consider themselves middle income, who are now facing new financial pressures in their daily lives. We are living in what many economists call a K-shaped economy, where wealthier households continue to thrive, while others are falling further and further behind. And the gaps in wealth and income are widening, the cost of living has surged, and wages have not kept pace. And because Maryland has a large number of high-income households, families who own homes, hold investment portfolios, pay taxes on capital gains, their economic activity can mask the struggles of those on the downward leg of the K. But we certainly know those struggles are real, and we have to confront them. We also know that affordability is a huge challenge in Maryland. Since the pandemic, more families and younger workers have left Maryland than prior to the pandemic, seeking more affordable living in our peer states. Housing is one of the largest expenses for most families, and those with the least disposable income are hit the hardest. Our agency this fall released a report showing that housing is a key factor in why Maryland has become less affordable than some of our neighbors. Another indicator to look at for financial stress is credit. The Federal Reserve's Center for Microeconomic Data reported that U.S. credit card debt reached $1.23 trillion at the end of Q3, and according to TransUnion, the average American carries over $6,500 in credit card debt, but in Maryland, the average is higher. It's over $7,200. Which is a really sobering reminder that many families are having to rely on credit to make ends meet, even as corporations are reporting record profits. We're also seeing shifts in consumer behavior. Restaurants without beer and wine licenses, for instance, are experiencing revenue declines. Supermarkets are seeing reduced sales of taxable goods, indicating that people are prioritizing essentials and cutting back on convenience items like prepared foods. That's here in Maryland. Meanwhile, our general fund revenues remain steady, buoyed in part, as Director Rehrman said, by capital gains. And these trends reflect the reality of the K-shaped economy in Maryland. But instability among middle-income families will eventually impact our broader revenue stream, sales and use taxes, withholding revenue, and other sources that support our budget. Because the K-shaped economy, it's simply not sustainable for our economy or society. And the work of government must reflect the lived experiences of Marylanders, not just our balance sheets. So I look forward to continuing to work in partnership with Governor Moore, Senate President Ferguson, and our incoming Speaker, Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, the General Assembly, our Treasurer, our business community, and all those who are committed to building a more affordable and equitable Maryland. Thank you so much, and I will turn it over to the Treasurer or to the Secretary. Secretary Weissman, you get to go first.
And this was always what it
Yes, it always, then the Secretary. Yep.
You can't come here and change things.
No, I'm the new guy. I'm learning as I go. Thank you, Madam Comptroller. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Director Rehrman, thank you. I mentioned earlier this week when we spoke that the numbers that we're seeing today is a reflection of the work that your team does, right? That stability that you forecasted, that lets us have that faith and that accuracy. And just thank you for your work. And you know, what we're seeing is, as the comptroller said, there are federal actions that continue to create real uncertainty, not just for our budget, but for the Marylanders who are affected in any number of ways, whether it's through employment, through federal programs and benefits. And the choices that are being made in Washington, D.C. by this administration are choices that purposely harm Marylanders. And I'm so grateful that we have these dedicated partners in this fight. And these challenging conditions underscore why the Moore-Miller administration remains firmly focused on responsible fiscal management. As the governor said yesterday, at Winter Mako, the choices in front of us are difficult. We'll continue to protect the essential programs Marylanders depend on and apply the same discipline that has guided this administration over the last 3 years. Maryland has a long bipartisan tradition of stepping up when fiscal pressures arise, supported by strong financial practices that give us guardrails and early warning tools, and that history is clearly serving us now. From day one, the Moore Miller administration has prioritized fiscal responsibility, which will be reflected in the hard choices in this year's budget. And we'll continue that commitment as conditions just continue to evolve on the federal and state level. But we are fortunate, and just want to say thank you again, to have steady collaborative partners in the presiding officers, the budget committees, the comptroller, and the treasurer. And together, we'll work together to ensure that Maryland remains on solid footing and prepare for whatever comes next. Thank you.
Yeah, that would help. Thanks Secretary Rearman and his staff. As always, you do a wonderful job, and we certainly appreciate all the hard work and effort to you, Madam Controller, and your staff, and Secretary Wiseman as well. Listen, I could go on and give a soliloquy here, but you've heard, everything's been said, just everybody hasn't said it. So it's my turn, and I think the key takeaway from all of this is what Secretary Rearman said, that economic forecast is consistent with the September and expect growth to slow in calendar year 26. To me, that's the big takeaway from all of this. There's been some reshuffling of what we thought would be higher in terms of projections. It may not have been the same. Some things we thought were lower, it turns out to be a little bit higher. But the bottom line takeaway is all of this is consistent with what we've said in September, and probably even a little longer if we go back and look at our notes. The second thing that's a key takeaway is that the uncertainty remains over federal policy actions. We can never decouple that from our planning and what we do at any given moment. A tariff will pop up, or somebody will be sanctioned. We won't have a shutdown. I'm telling you, we won't have a shutdown next year. Everybody's up for election, and while they will jeopardize our well-being, they won't jeopardize their own. So I guarantee you, we won't have a shutdown next year, but everything else is just at the whim of Washington, and we'll adjust accordingly. I think Jake and Secretary Wiseman and Comptroller Learman said it best. We have great leadership here in Annapolis, and I'm sure Governor Moore and President Ferguson, and if everything we're hearing is correctly, Speaker Pena-Melnick, they'll do a good job of guiding and keeping us the course. The bills will be consistently paid. So for those from Wall Street who are worried about that, don't. The bills will be paid, and they will be paid on time. So thank you very much, and thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Can I have a motion to adopt the revised forecast as presented today?
That's your job, Jake. And I'm second.
Great. The forecast has been adopted. Thank you so much. This concludes the December meeting, the final meeting of a tumultuous 2025. Thank you all so very much, and happy holidays.